Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Michael Bullock and this is part one of my how-to painting fall foliage video. It was filmed in my studio in Artifacts 302 located in Farmington, New Mexico. I really hope you enjoy this paint along how-to video. I had a lot of fun creating this painting. If you want to paint along with me, you can download my sketch using the link in the show notes below. This painting comes mostly from memory and is a conglomeration of several areas in the Riverwalk of Berg Park in Farmington, New Mexico. I feel blessed to have this amazing river trail system running through our city. If you're ever visiting New Mexico, our Riverwalk, downtown Farmington, downtown Aztec, and San Juan County in general should be on your list of places to visit. While you're visiting, be sure to check out Artifacts 302 in the Studio Bake Shop. Most likely, you can pop in, meet me, and get some great coffee and pastries to enjoy while you visit. If you're new to the channel, which I'm assuming most people are because I'm still very new to YouTube, take a moment and like the video and subscribe to the channel. It'll really help me to continue to keep bringing you fun watercolor content like this. If you enjoyed this video, consider sharing it with others you think would also enjoy it. Also, check out my website at bulletgallery.com. I'm going to make a little plug for Utrecht Art Supplies. My affiliate link is in the description down below. Clicking it will take you to my curated supply list. Be sure and check that out. Some of the items, like paint colors, are doubled up because I'm recommending two different brands, and so they're available from both of them. Don't feel like you need to order everything. Just take a look and pick and choose things you think you might like. I also have a discount code for Mead & Art, which is MBW70. That'll get you 12% off your purchase. The link for that is also below. Mead is a great site for budget-conscious artists, especially those wanting to try watercolor for the first time. They have some great deals on their brand of watercolor paints and brushes and feature some amazing studio furniture. So be sure and check them out as well. I really like their 140-pound 100% cotton rag watercolor paper as a great budget alternative to arches. In fact, this painting is on Mead paper. Also, don't feel that you need to order a bunch of stuff to try watercolors. If you already have supplies, then use them. The best supplies are the ones you already have. Now let's get started with part one of my how-to painting fall foliage. Let's get started with this newest painting and painting techniques. And so we're going to learn how to paint some trees with fall foliage. I have this quick sketch that I did here kind of from memory. And I'll make sure that there's a copy of the sketch in the show notes if you're interested in painting along with me. So let's get started. For this, I'm going to be using some things like natural sponges, sometimes called elephant ear sponges. Obviously, I'm going to be using brushes, and I'm also going to be using these spray bottles. So these are 2-ounce spray bottles. This particular brand is sort of not available anymore. I mean, the bottle is, you can get this bottle from Holbein, but they don't have the correct spray nozzles on them anymore. I'm not sure why they stopped doing that. Hello. If you'll notice, let's see if I can get this to focus. This one has a little arrow and a dot behind it. And that just shows you that it's kind of a varied size spray bottle, spray pattern. It doesn't, it's not a fine mist sprayer. And the difference is that you can, I'm not going to actually spray this, but you can barely push the nozzle down and it'll just kind of spit out a little, let me just kind of zoom out here. It'll just kind of spit out a varied kind of pattern of color. So it won't be, a fine mist of small, tiny dots. It'll be a smaller pattern of tiny dots and medium-sized dots and little dots and large dots. Just a quick note, while the Holbein spray bottles are still available, they don't work the same, so I don't recommend buying them anymore. However, you can purchase them through Tom Lynch at artacademylive.com or everettswatercolors.com.
Both of these artists sell a version of this bottle.
This is what his look like. They, you know, if you look carefully, you can see they don't have that little arrow with a dot, but they do. I have tried these out; they do work.
When I originally filmed this, my Everett's watercolor bottles had not shown up, but they're almost identical. The only difference is the top is not purple and yellow; it's just white. But they both of these bottles work exactly the same as the old Holbein ones. They do a nice varied dot pattern.
I ordered these because I wanted to, know if they worked. And B, I thought I could show people what these were. Both of them sell kits. Tom sells a fine mist sprayer that I think is interchangeable with his bottles. So here you can see this is a fine mist sprayer, which has cobalt blue in it. And if I wanted a dot pattern of cobalt blue, I could just switch out the lids. That's kind of the gist. But we're gonna be using a variety of tools to kind of paint these trees. I wish I could recommend the Holbein ones, but I just can't. Let's see if we can. One of the tricks to using these, I'm just going to go through this really quick, is you'll notice, you may or may not, I don't know if you can see that, there's a whole lot of paint sludge. You can kind of see it right there. There's a whole lot of paint sludge in the bottom of this bottle. And if I were to try to spray that like this, clearly that would get sucked up into the spray nozzle and it would clog. And if you if you see my water container here is full of spray nozzles that I'm soaking to try and loosen up any other, any of the clogged paint that gets in there. So you want to make sure that you really you shake it up really good. Generally, I will leave the little plastic cap on there because sometimes, especially if it's an older bottle, it might leak a little bit or whatever. So I try to shake it up pretty good, and I'll do a couple of test spritzes in my water container. Just to make sure that it's working. And I also, it's a little hard now that I've shook this up, but you can kind of see right in there that dark kind of curve. That's the straw that's coming down from the little fingertip pump sprayer. And you want to find out where that is. In this case, it's right there. So I want to turn my spray nozzle to the same direction. That's one thing, like one criticism I have of the Tom Lynch ones is he doesn't have a curved straw in there anymore. I don't know what that's about. But so you can't hold it at an angle and keep that straw curved down in there. So that's the one criticism I have of these. I mean, they work great. I haven't had a problem with the one I was trying out. I don't even know if this one's not gonna work. This one's a little clogged up. Let's try one we've been farting around with here, cleaning. Do I have any of the tops back on these guys? So I was kind of taking them apart and cleaning them out. Let's just grab this one off of this. We'll just grab this one off of this bottle. This is an old one, like super old. You can see like it's a completely different label. And it has I found this at a garage sale. You can see it has a price of like will that focus? I don't know. There it is. It has a price of $1.95. These things haven't been $1.95 since I don't know when. You can just kind of see, like, if I just barely push it, it puts out a cool. Yeah. So you can see I kind of got a varied dot pattern. And then if you do something where you use so I have one here with just water. And I didn't finish explaining. So see where that straw is. It kind of points down, and it's a little harder to see on this, but it kind of points down in that area. So if I hold this at an angle where the straw is going down into that kind of corner, for lack of a better word, of the bottle, and I have this angled at the same way, as long as I'm kind of holding it
at a 45-degree angle, I'll always have a little puddle of water down in the bottom of my bottle. But so you can see here, let me zoom back out just because that's a little close. So you can see here, if I kind of spritz some of this on top of that now, I get this really cool kind of funky effect. So just some fun things. So we're going to be using some of these bottles, if I can get them to work, and some of, I'm going to be using the sponge and brushes as well to paint these cotton. I kind of think these are cottonwood trees down by the Animas River. We have a nice river walk here in Farmington. It's not at all like the river walk in San Antonio. This is more of a nature river walk, but we have some beautiful cottonwood trees, and this kind of feels like that. Cottonwood trees in the fall. One other thing real quick about these spray bottles like this is you're going to want to actually take the tops off, just like I did to change this one out. And then you can't really see this, but let me see if I can zoom back out, kind of zoom back out. And then you want to stick it in your water, either one. I'm going to stick it in this one, and run clean water through it until it doesn't spray colored water. So it's spraying clean water through it. So you want to do that first before you put it away. So that way, now I know that this is cleaned out. It shouldn't clog. Let's see, that one cap goes to that guy. But you can also spray, like I could use this orange. I could use this permanent yellow deep. I could use this permanent yellow lemon. I could use all of these to just make up my light areas and then come in with darker stuff later. All right, so now that I've kind of gone over the tools I'll be using to create this, let me get this cleaned up and out of the way. And we'll be back. All right, I'm going to quickly sketch this series of cottonwood trees on my paper. Now, it looks like it's taped down. It's not. This is that block of Meaden watercolor, 100% cotton watercolor paper, 140 pound. You can see. I just like that clean edge on the paper. Sometimes if I'm painting with 300 pound, I don't do this. It's just one of those things. I just like that clean edge. I don't really need to do this, but it just makes a nice clean edge. So, and I'm just sort of folding this over just because I think I'm procrastinating actually starting to draw. And I actually like drawing, but for some reason I'm procrastinating this. I don't know if any of you guys suffer from that problem, but I definitely suffer from that. Sometimes just getting past that. If you remember the sketch, this is it. And I kind of feel like I want to maybe move this. I've got this kind of centered a little bit more than I want. I want to move it over. So I'm going to take that into account. And so I kind of want to think about the placement of this tree. I have it, I think, a little too centered. So I think if I can shift it over a little bit and shrink the width of these trees back in here. So, and I'm looking at something like maybe the top of that tree being, I might enlarge it a little bit. So let's see, we'll just kind of bring it around like so, maybe kind of something like that. I kind of like this kind of angular or triangular shape there. We'll just kind of come across like so. So really, I'm just kind of, and I don't know how, can't really see that. So let me see if I can't zoom in a little. Take my pencil out of my mouth. Let me see if I can't zoom in a little bit. It's a little hard to see. I'll zoom in after I get it done so you can see. But we'll just kind of, I'll probably hit time lapse just so that this goes a little faster for you guys so you're not like waiting on me to. I like this tree shape a little bit better than the one in my sketch. And I'm looking at a, kind of a
horizon line of somewhere in here. So let's see. I do like this, how this kind of larger tree is back here in the background. So I'm going to bring that in next. And maybe there's some smaller ones, some taller ones. And then there's going to be like some grassy stuff. There might be shorter, bushy things here next to the clearing. We'll just kind of bring those in. Maybe they're kind of coming in like so. Trees coming in there. Maybe some smaller brushy things. And then I definitely want, this one's going to have the trunk visible. So maybe that comes in. And I kind of feel like maybe, at one time this was like had two kind of big trunks. Maybe it kind of got trimmed at some point. So you have this big kind of stump looking thing over here. And then I know I'm going to have some shadows down in here. So I kind of want to just kind of, kind of just to kind of, okay, just kind of done there. Let me just, I'll just kind of zoom in and you can see the composition there. We have this central tree in this area, these trees back in here, and then, some kind of scrubby brush stuff, and then this field. I'm going to zoom back out. Oops, nope. Zoom back out. As I said a minute ago, put my little sponge up there. We're going to be using, like a combination of, maybe we'll use this one. I like this one in particular, so I'll probably, this one's nice. It hadn't been used a lot, but you can see if I hold it up to the thing. It's got a little bit of yellow paint on there. This part has never been used. These are actually off the same sponge. So I have a whole Ziploc bag here full of sponges. I particularly like this one. You can see it's been used a lot. It also was off of this same, but it's got a lot of green and stuff stains on it. This is a different sponge that I haven't used a lot of. It's pretty fine. Let's see, that's kind of another piece of that one. Might be interesting. There's another chunk that hadn't been used, but might be helpful. I like to have a few just because I like to use them dry with just the paint most of the time. So I've got those. I think I'm just going to go with this assortment that I have up here. Besides the sponge, I'm also going to be, like we talked about, I'm going to be using some spray bottles like these. And, I already talked about where you can get them. I'm clearly going to be using, yellow, my permanent yellow lemon. And these are Holbein colors that I'm using. I have permanent yellow orange, permanent yellow. If you've painted with me before or you've taken my class, you know that I always like to paint the skies last if I'm painting a scene. And this one's no different. This sky is going to be dark, as you can see from my sketch. I kind of want this storm with this light coming in from back over in here really low, illuminating this tree and these trees, and then casting these interesting shadows coming across this way. First thing I'm going to do is, now that I've got one of the first things I want to do is kind of maybe apply a little texture using a sponge. And I think I'm going to try this one. It hasn't been used very much. I've used this little corner here. And I'm going to come in with a little lemon yellow at first. So I'm just going to come over here and pick up some of that. I'm going to come in, oops, and that's okay. That's just a demonstration not to panic. But I'm going to come in and just put in a little of this lemon yellow towards the top of this tree. Pick up a little more of that. Probably a little bit up in here as well. Maybe some down in here. And some of this, is going to disappear. It won't be quite this light or whatever. Also, just a little, I didn't do this, but if it were me, if I were you, if you're painting along with me, I might roll my kneaded eraser over these lines just to lighten them a little bit. If you're using yellow paint will seal graphite to your paper, whereas like blues, purples, and reds won't for some reason. So we'll do that. Then we'll just move on down. I want to grab some of this permanent yellow deep, grab a little of that, and we'll just come back in with a little more of that. Now, if you were going for more of a brown, like I'm going for, these are pretty early in the fall. Let's see, I think I'm going to put a little bit more light over here. Too late. Gotta wash this out. Now, I have washed this out. I just have to. There we go. I'll just pull some of that in. So I've added some. I can come in and kind of stick those together. And I haven't done a whole lot here. Let's see. I am going to bring in some permanent yellow oranges. We'll just bring in some of that as well. So we're just kind of getting some good texture in here. Let's some of this permanent yellow deep as well. I forgot to put in there, but that's pretty good. I like that. That's kind of a nice texture that I've got so far. I can change that up with use of spray bottles. I could do some lifting later, that kind of stuff. Let's just do a little bit of permanent yellow lemon, so we'll get this shook up really good. So I really have to shake this up good. Now you can see it's starting. Well, maybe you can see it's starting to get mixed back in there, get back into the solution. Let's give it a few practice spritzes till yellow starts coming out, and then I'm just going to kind of. You can see I'm starting to get some cool. Let me just kind of zoom in on that real quick. I'm going to start getting some cool texture. Random dot patterns. Some of this will get covered up, some of it won't. There we go. Sometimes if you're not angling your spray bottle in the right direction, it can kind of do some crazy stuff there, but there we go. I kind of like that. And I've got like a little water up here. I'll just use this Kleenex to pick up some of this excess water. And then we'll switch to permanent yellow deep. Let's come in with a little of this. I'm going to just take the top off of this and clean it out.
I had to take a quick break there. So this is dry.
So I can actually, because I think I got a little bit much on here, I'm going to lift some of this back out using my spray bottle that just has clean water in it. And I'm just going to kind of spritz it in a few of these areas that I feel are maybe a little over saturated with some of this color. And I'm going to let it sit a little bit and then sort of reactivate that paint. Then I can just kind of blot it up after I let it sit, and then take the dry side of my brush. And you can see I lifted quite a bit of that darker stuff and made a nice little interesting area of white. I'm starting to like that a little bit. I don't normally use burnt sienna in my trees, but I kind of feel, cottonwoods, as they start to get a little further on in the season, instead of turning red or something like that, they actually kind of turn brown. But it's still a real pretty golden brown. And so I'm going to use some burnt sienna. And I can just come in and spritz a little of this dark burnt sienna in some areas around this, just to give it a little more shadowy kind of shapes, places where shadow is coming, because the light's kind of behind here and coming forward. So there's going to be a lot of this darker shadow. And it looks a little red on screen, but it's really burnt sienna. And I might use some of my permanent magenta. And I'm just going to kind of... I don't like that big dot of quinacridone violet, so I'm just going to pick that up. Now, the fact that it did what it did there is kind of annoying, but also... There we go. So I'll just add a little of this permanent magenta. This sprayer is just having some issues. I'm not going to use this anymore because I'm having some issues with this nozzle. But I think this will be good. I know it looks sloppy and messy right now, but every watercolor should kind of start out a little sloppy and messy. I'm going to come back in with some of this with a Kleenex here. Pick some of that back up. I got maybe a little bit too much here with that. Grab another Kleenex here. Grab a little excess stuff. The cool thing is, like, you can let it dry for a little bit and then go in and pick it up, and you end up with some interesting... Let me just kind of zoom in on that if I can. You can see I've still got that kind of dot of, the larger dot of color, but, it's kind of lightened up in some areas. Same with right there. So just pick up a little of that excess as I'm going along, where I feel like I might have gotten a little too much. And I just did that with a tissue. All right. So, I think what I'm going to do is now, while this is drying, I'm going to work on some of this foreground area here. And this, if you've painted along with me in the past, you'll kind of be familiar with this. Let me just kind of click over. But I'm going to actually start with, I'm going to just kind of clean my palette up a little bit. So I'm going to take my sponge here and kind of get rid of this stuff from the last painting I was working on, which was kind of more of an abstract thing that I was doing for a friend's wedding. Okay, so there's that. Kind of nice and clean. Let me just dry it off a little bit. So I'm going to start with a little of my permanent yellow deep. If you don't have permanent yellow deep, or if you have, like cadmium yellow medium or medium deep, or Indian yellow, which is what this is, or no, this is azo yellow, this is Indian yellow.
Either of those work really good. This is just kind of my go-to. So I'm going to grab some of that and make myself a little puddle here. I know I'm going to use some of that, so I'll just kind of split the difference here on the screen so you can kind of see what I'm doing. And I'm going to come in with a nice kind of wash here. I'm going to overlap this sort of line that I have here. It's kind of a scribbly line that's dividing these kind of foreground bushes or mid-ground bushes from the foreground here. And I'm just going to kind of put some of this down. Maybe there's a little bit more over in this area, down in here as well. And then we'll just come in. Maybe I'll use a little permanent yellow orange. So we'll use a little of that. We'll come in with some of that as well in some areas. Just kind of get the two, you know, on the page it looks a little, they look very similar, but we'll just add a little of that dark, little more pigment in that wash. Maybe a little permanent green number 1 mixed with a little permanent yellow lemon, just so I get a lighter green. Let me clean my brush out before I go back into that lemon yellow. I ain't getting green in there. It's already kind of got a green tint to it. So we'll just kind of keep working around. You kind of want this to be fairly wet, and I got my ceiling fan on because it's kind of warm today. Inside here, it's 57 degrees outside. So we'll just kind of... So that's that permanent green number 1 mixed with some lemon yellow. Maybe I'll come in with a little Scarlet Lake here as well. So I've got a little Scarlet Lake that I like. You could use permanent red. Any of these, you know, kind of reds and stuff, but we'll just have... this is just, you know, maybe grass with seed buds. Let's lift some of that. Some of this, maybe come back with some of this permanent yellow deep. And you can see I'm just kind of doing this multicolored wash across my foreground. Kind of painting around this tree. It's going to be fairly dark, but I don't... but you can see I am overlapping this set of bushes and stuff. You know, this is such a light color that it's not going to be too bad. I could even come in with a little quinacridone gold just to have a little bit of kind of earth tone in there as well. So we'll just throw in a little of that, and it's a nice, really vibrant gold yellow. It's like yellow ochre on steroids. For, you know, if you're really into some, you know, kind of brighter colors. So we've got this nice mix going on up front here. You know, maybe I got a little too much, so I can in some areas, so I can actually soften some of that just by, you know, maybe I want to add a little opera in some areas, you know, some parts of this, just to give it a little variation, a little more variation. You know, we got a lot of that Scarlet Lake, but the opera's got this kind of pretty pink kind of color. So I'm just going to squeeze out this brush and pick up some of my excess water down here at the bottom. I don't want this, as this area dries up in here, this heavier water, this, you know, more water area here or whatever, larger puddles, I should say, will start to push back up and wick back up into here and cause some, while I do like blossoms, that particular one down in here is not, you know, it generally doesn't make a nice looking one. So
I just want to pick up some of that excess paint around the edge of kind of, around the edge of this bottom foreground area, just so it doesn't form. And as this, is drying, I can go in and add a little bit more water in some spots where it is drying more and get blossoms that I do like. That's kind of already interesting. I don't want to mess with that, so I want to lighten some of this up. Just add a little bit more, just to brighten some of this. I mean, some of this is going to be in shadow, so it's not going to really matter, but oh yeah, we got some. I can even come back in and do a little tissue pickup where I just pick some of that up, and let that maybe down in here as well, where I don't want that weird. It works just the same as a thirsty brush. So you can see this is not really. I mean, it's still very loose. I got a lot of orange and yellow and reds. So now I want to add a little bit of, I'm going to use my number 8 round. So I feel like this mid-ground area is some other type of vegetation. I'm still going to start probably with a little lemon yellow. I'll just bring that in up in here. A little of that. I'm going to have a little lemon yellow, maybe a little of this earth green, or green earth, I guess is what it's called. It's a Winsor Newton color. So it's kind of similar to sap green, although sap green's, like here's some sap green. It's a little brighter. Sap green's good too, though, if you don't have this green earth. Or no, that's not a Winsor Newton color. That's a Grumbacher color. It's pretty old too. Well, that was some paint my grandmother had. It was dried up, and I had to cut it out of the tube and then just sort of jammed it down in there, and then have softened it over time and gotten it into the shape of my little beading jar here. And then maybe I'm definitely going to use a little peacock blue, so we'll just do a little wash of that as well. So I'm going to come in with a little of this permanent yellow lemon. Now I've got some peacock blue in it. Let's just kind of zoom in quite a bit here. So I got a little more green in that than I'd want because of that peacock blue, but that's fine. That's fine. It doesn't matter. We'll just pick up a little more of the lemon yellow. And I'm just loosely flowing some of that color in there. Maybe we do add a little peacock blue in a few of these, to a few of these sections of this kind of mid-ground. And then we come in with some of that green earth, or if you want, you could use, and I'll probably use both. We'll just add a little of that in there. It's just a kind of a more muted color, and than the sap green. Sap green's a little brighter. The green earth, green earth is a little more muted than the sap green. So, but either of them good. I'm gonna grab a little indigo as well. Even though this is still pretty wet, I'm going to add a few kind of darker areas in here, just because this is going to get that dark. So I could even use a little quinacridone violet, mix in just a hint of that indigo, just to get a slightly darker violet. Video, we did a little of this, but it was even more
So I just want a little of this vibrancy to these darks. So we'll just have a little change in color. Moving along here. Let's go back to this indigo over in here, maybe. And then we'll come back in with some of this, maybe permanent yellow deep besides the lemon yellow. And this is not gonna, this is kind of slightly muddier area. Maybe this kind of comes up a little higher. Maybe this is going to come up into here a little bit more. It's a little taller behind this tree here. Then we start to kind of lose it. So we'll come back down in there. Maybe we'll throw in a little of the orange just because that's that permanent yellow orange. We could even use a little opera in a couple of spots just to give it, again, that variation in color. Most of my paintings have to do with that. That's what makes them interesting, in my opinion. We'll come back in with some of that peacock blue. Yeah, that may be a little too much water, so I can come back in and pick some of that up with a thirsty brush. I can take my brush and squeeze it out, and then come back in and pick up some of this excess water. Even continue to use that existing color that's in that water. Let's come back in with some of that violet again in here. Yeah, I'm liking that. That's interesting to me. Let's come in back up in here. We'll use some of that permanent yellow lemon and then the green earth. Grab a little more of that. I don't want this too dark next to this tree trunk because that tree trunk's going to be fairly dark. Come back in maybe with some sap green as well. Let's come back in here. This is that sap green again. Let's come back in now with that indigo. Maybe I'll grab a little Scarlet Lake as well. That's kind of make sure that I have some in a few other spots because I don't want it. I mean, it's not going to be as bright, but this is kind of my area of interest. Let's come in with some violet now. So this is that indigo mixed with quinacridone violet. So it's a pretty dark violet. On screen it kind of looks black almost. Yeah, I'm fairly happy with that. I actually like this area a little bit more than this.
I might come in and add, just before this completely dries, just a little bit more opera in a couple of spots here, just to get it a little brighter. I'm a bright color kind of guy, even though this is going to be a fairly dark painting. I still want those areas popping color.
All right, so I'm gonna switch over. So we've kind of done this mid ground, this middle ground area. We've kind of worked on the foreground. I'm gonna do this other part of this, mid ground, and then deal with this tree a little bit, add a little bit more detail to it. Let's just scroll over here. I'm gonna zoom back out, I think. I'm gonna switch to my number 8 round. It's kind of a nice medium size. My number 10 would be fine as well. It gets a nice point. And then there's the number 6. Feel free to use any size of, 6, 8, 10, whatever you're comfortable with. Currently, I'm going to use my number 8, and I want to start adding some kind of darks in here. We're going to get this kind of dark shadow because the light is coming through these trees. And I'm thinking I'm going to come in. I have a little. I'm going to do a variety of kind of medium reds in here. I think I'm going to start with a little quinacridone violet. Let's come back in with a little, and it also helps to actually show you what I'm doing. So just kind of put a little wash here. Let's bring in a little Scarlet Lake.
I'm just switching back and forth between that permanent yellow deep and the Scarlet Lake, using both of those to kind of get them to blend together and create these sort of slightly darker areas of the trees.
I could even use a little quinacridone gold. That's what this is right here. So I'm just adding a little bit more dark to some areas of this tree. I want some lost and found edges, so I'm not completely surrounding this, section of tree. But we'll just kind of come in maybe with a little more of this quinacridone gold. Let's grab a little opera as well. Just gives it a little more bright. I'm just kind of working my way around the tree, kind of looking at things that maybe I might even grab a little Over here, this is burnt sienna. Might work in a little quinacridone gold to that burnt sienna just to make it a little more bright and a little more poppy. Just kind of bringing in some of this. I could grab a little more of this permanent yellow deep down in here. And that actually is mixed with a little quinacridone gold just because I didn't wash my brush out very well. I can lift some of this back up maybe.
I'm just going to continue to add quinacridone gold to the top here and kind of work my way around the tree. And here I'm just taking kind of a thirsty brush and picking up some of that excess that I may have gotten a little too much pigment on the paper right there. So I'm just using the brush that's clean to pick that up. And
I'm going to grab a little of my quinacridone violet royal blue mix, and I'm going to mix that with my burnt sienna just to add let's come in now with some quinacridone gold. Maybe come back in with some burnt sienna as well. Grab a little permanent yellow deep, just add a little bit more of that in here. Let's come back with some of that burnt sienna. And I'm just kind of, you know, even though these were like darker bushes and maybe this was a tree behind it, I can change my mind and I can sculpt the top of these. You know, maybe there's another section of trees or something going on here. Let me grab some of that quinacridone violet royal blue mix. Just grab a little more of that. We'll just kind of bring this down in here. Let's come back down in here with some of that violet, dark violet. We're just going to make this dark back in here. A little more quinacridone gold right in here, just to kind of get that interesting dark to light fuse. So I'm letting this is really wet, and I'm letting it run into each other right there. I could even grab a little permanent, nope, I'll get it right here in a second, little opera, and drop some of that in there just for that color change, just to make it a little more interesting. I probably should have started over here and worked my way this way, but So we're starting to get some interesting things happening. I may lift, well, I'm going to leave that alone for right now. What I am going to do real quick though is kind of soften this as we get towards the edge of the page. I don't want that to be quite as sharp an edge, and now that it's dry, I can do that just with some water. You see, I'll completely clean my brush out here and just use some water, soften that. We'll do the same thing over here on this side. I might add a little Hooker's green. Just a little bit more dark. I'm going to do some more of this kind of stuff over in here. I might add, before I do that, I might add a little more of this. I kind of like this lighter, some of this quinacridone gold down in here. Just kind of soften some of these edges, because I'm going to dry this over here. So I'm not too worried about this drying. I'm going to leave that alone for a while. But this I kind of want to dry, so just hit that with a hairdryer. And then I'm going to come back in with just some quinacridone violet alone, because that's what I've got here. And I'm just going to maybe add in a little bit more. Just kind of putting in some shapes. I'm mostly using the tip of my brush. I'm sort of experimenting with different shapes. I will use the side. I'll push. If the side of my finger is the paper, I'll push down like that to make some marks. But a lot of it is just barely using the tip. Now, let's come back in. I've got that. Let's use some of that quinacridone gold. Let that kind of sink in there. Let's grab some permanent yellow deep. Let's grab a little of that permanent yellow lemon and throw a little of that in there. Maybe there'll be a little bit of a
Highlight up here at the top of these trees. Now I'm switching to a little Scarlet Lake just to get the two colors to kind of blend in together.
just kind of lift some of this back up. Let's grab a little permanent yellow deep. Maybe grab a little of this opera. Add a little more of that down in here as well. Adding texture and color variation for all this. Now I don't like how I have this kind of little triangle thing here and then another little triangle thing there, so I think I'm going to just get rid of that. There we go. That's better. I like that a little better. Grab a little more permanent yellow deep just over, and just continue to kind of pull that this way. It doesn't have to necessarily look like anything yet. We'll go ahead and zoom in on this. So we've got this nice, I want this nice glow coming through here, so I've got that permanent yellow deep, but I'm also going to come back in with some more permanent yellow lemon just to kind of get those to
Let's make a little switch here to that burnt sienna with a little quinacridone violet. I'll show you what I'm doing. So I've got a little of the burnt sienna here, and so that's just up in here. So I got a little burnt sienna. And then I can come back in with a little of that quinacridone violet. We'll just add a little of that, which that's a little much, but I can just kind of, there we go. So we get a slightly redder dark. Now I do have what's called brown madder, which is kind of a reddish brown, and that's this color right here. You can see my brush pointing at right there. And then I have some quinacridone burnt orange. Both of those are pretty similar to this, but I just thought, you know, I'd show you how I can mix something. So let's come back over here. Whee! There we go. And let's start, you know, thinking about this shape. And if some of it runs into the wet paint, that's okay, because it just gives you that feathery leaf kind of thing going on there. This can all be kind of a darker. We'll come in. I'm going to make some quinacridone violet royal blue mix, just also to throw in there, just to give it a nice little. Let's go back in with some opera. Throw in a little of that. It seems like it's dark, but opera is not a dark color. So it's you know, if you looked at this in grayscale, that almost looked white. But I can lift some of that back out, so it's not quite as dark. But you can see this is just a matter of kind of looking at shapes. You know, maybe I want a little more glow down in here, so we'll add just a bit more of that. Maybe a little bit more lemon yellow as well. So that was permanent yellow deep. Let's grab a little permanent yellow orange, just like, well, what I've talked about before is that's very similar to cadmium orange. So if you're used to using cadmium orange, this is very similar. I think I've talked about why I don't use cadmium colors anymore. We have a studio cat here at Artifact. It's a super cute cat named Patches. It's 18 years old, so she's getting up there in age, but periodically, if I leave my my paint bucket full of water, she'll come drink out of that. I know that because I've watched her do it. And cadmium is poisonous, and I just don't want to risk hurting her. I'm going to grab a little alizarin crimson as well and throw some of that in. And so yeah, I don't want to accidentally poison the cat, so I switched from cadmium colors to these Holbein permanent colors. But if you don't have that problem, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's a very small amount of cadmium that's in those, but it is important to be aware of that. Bringing in a little more of this alizarin crimson down in here, so it's slightly brighter, but it's still dark. Let's come in with a little, just throw in a little permanent yellow orange, and then I grabbed also some permanent yellow deep and threw in a little of that. We'll just kind of pop that down in there, and we can soften this dark. I don't mind if it forms a little bit of mud. That's okay. Let's grab a little of that royal blue green, so it makes kind of a more blue green. We'll just add a little of that down in here as well, so it can kind of blend in, be a little brighter. I could just use a little peacock blue as well. Drop some of that in there. Oops, drop my brush. Now I don't like that shape that I made, but my plan was to clean my brush out and then just kind of soften that edge with just a little bit of water. I can wipe my brush off as well, so it has a little less water.
So all I did was kind of wipe my brush like that. I also have a sponge that used to be yellow, or it might have been pink. I don't remember, but yeah, I think it was pink. Anyway, you can tell it's been used for a lot of watercolor. You can wipe your brush on a damp sponge as well. That just kind of, I like that little bit of bright coming in right there. We'll just kind of so. There we go. So that was a little more opera I just dropped in there with a little of the orange. Let's come back in with some of that burnt sienna quinacridone violet mix and just kind of sort of let that bleed in there. If it's still a little wet, it's not that wet, but still kind of a, bring that in like so. Yeah, I'm liking that. I'm liking what's happening there. Kind of some interesting things happening color-wise. Let's zoom out. Yeah, I'm liking the shapes that are happening here. I'm liking the color variation. I think we're in good shape so far.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd really like to know if this is a good length for a video. I've been trying to keep them between 45 and 90 minutes. I know it's a bit long, so I hope you have as much fun painting as I do. Remember to tell yourself that we're just playing and having fun, no matter the outcome. If you made it this far and are enjoying what I'm doing, please consider subscribing to my channel and clicking the little bell to get notified of my next video. It's completely free and it really helps me out. Also, consider clicking the like button and sharing the video with anyone you think would also enjoy it. Leave a comment and let me know if you're enjoying my videos, and as always, if you have a question or comment, please leave it below. I'd love to hear from you. Let's have a great discussion down in the comments below, and I hope you're looking forward to finishing this painting with me next week. I had a blast painting this. So with that, I'll say goodbye and thank you for joining me. I'll see you all in the next video, and remember, life's too short to paint on cheap paper.